Good evening, everybody. Welcome at the last lecture for the day. And today we have invited Alexenko, the producer from Animograd, who also used to be head of digital cinema Ukraine, has over 10-year experience of working in film and animation industry, and also was the line producer of the project The Stolen Princess, which was sold to more than 50 territories in the world when it came out in 2018. And today we'll be talking about creative management, about how to properly organize work in a company, what are the values that the coworkers should stick to, and what do you do so that you don't burn out. So Sasha, over to you. Anastasia, thank you for introducing me. I'd like to thank everybody who have joined us in using this opportunity. I would like to say thank you to the team of this festival and specifically to program director Anastasia Verlinska. Thank you so much for so many years in a row working to help us dive deeper into a wonderful, magical world of animation. Thank you very much for that. I believe that people now should give you a round of applause behind their screens. As Anastasia said, I have been working for 10 years in film industry and have been working for 5 years out of these 10 in commercial animation. I'm a lucky person because I came to Animograd when it was at the beginning, and we had only 7 people in the studio back then. Now we have more than 100 full-time employees, as well as lots of people who work with us as outsourcers. And I was lucky to grow and develop together with our company. I was interested in different books. I was reading books about Pixar, Disney, Netflix, and so on. But I'd like to say the following clearly. In these books, I have found lots of insights, but you have to keep in mind that these books were written by men and women who are working in the industry, where they have been working for 20-25 years, having millions of budget. Ukrainian film industry, on the one hand, has a very long history, and on the other hand, let's put it that way, the new page in animation is still very young. That is why today my lecture is called What Not to Do. Because you can Google what you should do or read it in Ed Catmull's book, but you have to really experience what you should not do. And I'd like to start with the following. Oh, we jumped a couple of slides. Going back to the basics. What do I mean? Of course, management in animation is a very complicated thing because you have to properly combine creativity, search for creative things, technical means that cost a lot and are very complex, and time means budgets, and you have to strike the balance. And every kind of animation has certain tools that are applied in management or organization of working process. It can be organized, there are different apps, but I'm 100% sure that all of that is only what we use to work with the team. But sometimes they can be different. It depends on whether you're working with commercial animation, if you're working with 2D or 3D, with motion graphics, or some other types of animation. Therefore, you will be using different tools that are applicable for different types of tasks. But once again, these tools are just the tools in the hands of the managers. The most important part is that goes about the foundation. The foundation is proper work values, the proper work principles, structuring everything in your head and structuring everything in your work. Today, we will talk about these principles. In the end, we're going to have some time, and I will be glad to answer all of your specific and technical questions. Meanwhile, I'd like to talk about these basics, because I believe that if you do it in a proper way, if you lay a solid foundation, afterwards you will be able, using all of the available technical means and tools, come closer to your goal, to your target. The first thing that I'd like to start with is the first important thing is vision. What does that mean? It means that we all together have to understand in what direction we're headed, what is our goal. There is a notion of tactics and there is a notion of strategy. And having a vision and properly conveying it, communicating with the team is very important. Let me give you an example with the stolen princess. Clearly, we knew that that deadline is far away. But our distribution team, and I'm very grateful to them for that, they did a great job, brought our material to different markets, American film market, European film market, and so on and so forth. These were short-term timelines when you had to produce certain amount of material. And when I was working with our team, the head of production, saying, guys and girls, look, now we have to work harder because by this date we have to produce that and that. The quality can be lowered a little bit so that we can produce this volume. For this kind of task, that works, but for long perspective, this approach will not fit. That is why it is important when we're planning something, when we want to achieve some goal, to explain people why do we do that. Because if I simply came and said, guys and girls, tomorrow we have to do 4 more animation shots, so they say, no, that's not impossible for tomorrow. But when you say that we have to make 4 animation shots, then we're going to have the full episode, and it will give more opportunities to our distribution team to further sell the cartoon, the motivation shifts. Also, if we do not understand in what direction we're headed, the people whom we lead will also not understand where we're headed. That is why misunderstandings come up when everybody does their part of work, but you cannot put the puzzle together. And one more important thing, when we have the vision, we can try being risky. Let me give you an example about Fast and Furious film. I don't remember its name in Ukrainian, but when we were working on it, it was quite a risky thing because it was supposed to be low-budget film, but in the end, it became a large franchise that is going to be popular as long as Vin Diesel is a part of it. So when we have a vision, when we understand what we're headed towards, we can do that. For example, do you want to create one feature film, or do we want to create Ukrainian Disney? Do we want to create one short that will win a prize at a festival? Or do we want to produce lots of different shorts dedicated to different topics, trying to express our attitude towards what is happening in the country outside of it or certain events? These are different types of visions, and depending on the vision, we have to pick the tools. If my task is to create one feature film, I don't have to be worried whether I'm gonna have some shots left or not. I don't have the stuff or not. We just get together, we create one thing, and that's it. But if I am planning to create Ukrainian Disney, one film will be the first step. I have to also create pipeline. I have to develop systems. I have to engage professionals. I have to think what's coming in tomorrow. And I hope that you understand what I'm talking about. And it's hard for me to choose the word in Ukrainian, but I want you to really feel this idea. The next thing that I want to talk about is priorities. What do I mean by that? Let's imagine that you have a task to write a large sentence with many different words, but say you're way too focused on comma. 3 weeks pass and you come with a comma, beautiful comma, the most beautiful comma in the world. Nobody has ever seen comma like that. Say one animation shot that is so great that, oh my god, it beats all of the records. But compared to other shots, your comma, compared to the rest of the sentence, looks as if you only have this comma and that's it. And this pains a lot when people are pulling an all-nighter. Many people working in animation know that normally you do not have a fixed schedule. Creativity and fixed work time do not really go well together. For me, it is important to set the priorities. What is important for us? Is it important for us to finalize our film and to get it ready in time, or is it important for us to try and refine one shot to make it as perfect as possible? But believe me, sometimes everything comes to an end. You cannot forever work on something trying to refine everything, every single comma. That can lead to very sad consequences. In my work, I always stick to the following. I know that in all the books they say that it is the wrong thing to do, but I believe that you have to know what your priorities are. You should have a vision, and in your priorities you have to work as the manager so that you can delegate your work and then do your job. When there are tasks coming from producers or somebody else, the one that you have to implement and somebody else does it, I will always put my budget to the side that I was working on. I will always put to the side the time and that I was working on for 6 hours. I'm gonna delegate the task, and only afterwards I'm gonna go back to my work. Some people say that it is not really effective because you're losing time to again get back to what you were working on. But I think that our priority is to delegate work so that the processes don't get stuck. Manager can sacrifice 1 or 2 hours of their time so that they can go back to what they were working on before. The next thing that I want to talk about, there are 3 words in Ukrainian that start with Ukrainian letter P. There will be only 3 of them, and here is the third one, which is consistency. In Ukraine starts with P. To put it simple, every manager should understand what they are managing. I can tell the following. If I were simply conveying words the way one professional told them to another professional without trying to understand what specifically that means and what an artist is talking about, I would not be able to do what I'm doing. It is critical for manager to be efficient, especially working with such a complicated genre as animation. They should at least superficially but very well understand the process, what software we're using, what can be substituted with what is the order. That is why I need the people who can help you explain things, but I believe that it is critical for a manager to get into details, to not simply perceive yourself as a transmitter who is simply transmitting the task, but really think about what you're doing. Our task is to understand the task, and it also stems from what I was mentioning before, what I said about the vision and priorities. Our task as a manager in animation is not simply about sending tasks from one place to another. When the producer wants something from us or explains something to us, or when a distribution team wants something, not simply hear that this needs to be transmitted there. No, you have to understand why you do this. Why do you bring it to that person? Why do you do that? Why do we have to do that working overtime, so that we understand, so that we can explain it to our team, and then our team will be like-minded people and together with us will work overtime to achieve the common goal. So once again, I'd like to emphasize that every manager should understand what you're managing. Given all the technologies, Google and books, it is very easy to figure things out superficially. But if you're going to work in close cooperation with your team, asking them about what bothers them, what works, what does not work, how can you make it work, when you start asking them questions and when they see that you're truly interested in that, let me convince you, you will learn lots of new things, interesting things. You'll understand where the time was wasted, where something wasn't working. That is why I emphasize it as an important thing. And one more word that starts with P in Ukrainian. For some reason, my magic wand does not work, which is pipeline. What do I mean by pipeline? This is a technical word which is a technical system of how everything works, where things stay, or what you call them. I know that not many of you in your studio or small team can build pipelines, hire special people who will be writing it down. By the way, once again, using this opportunity, I'd like to express the gratitude to our pipeline team because they help us a great deal. But I see pipeline as a system. When you start working on the project, even if you have 2-3 persons working on it, if from the very start you discuss how you name the files, how you transfer them, if you agree upon communication thing, whether this is a chat, shotgun, Trello, Google table, anything that fits your team, you will understand how much more efficient your work is, because file is called final 3.2 is hidden in the folder final 28, and if somebody has it on disk and this person was going home and lost this disk, well, your project is gone. I know what I'm talking about because not me personally, but my friends found themselves in a situation like that when their server broke down and they got 1 million files without the names, and they had to sort them manually. That is why system and organization is very important. And very often when you're trying to create a system like that, you come across some resistance, especially from those who are doing creative job. People don't want to remember how to name the slides. I can send it to you in Skype or Telegram, but you have to convey, explain, and tell that if we all are using the same system, even if it is very simple, use it as rules of the game. Believe me, it's gonna simplify our work. It took us a year. We were meeting in a meeting room, staying there for 8 to 9 hours. We had fights about what should be done, in what way, what follows what, but only thanks to spending time on that and agreeing upon rules regarding of what artist is using the computer. They can look up all of the information, who sent what to whom. If we did not do that, we would not be able to do that even the first feature. And I'm not even talking about the second one, which is more complicated and more interested than the first one. That is why to start to systemize your work with the team, you simply sometimes just need some sheet of paper and a pen. And one more thing that I'd like to point out. In your work as a manager, in animation, there might be a lot of routine that you can automate. For example, we have system when a person starts working with us or leaves. We have a set of rules what needs to be done. Before we created this set of rules, we were always trying to recall what chat we should add them to. This is just one of the examples, and you have to try to automate your work. Organize production meeting at the same day, at the same time. It doesn't work like that, but before every Tuesday, 11 a.m., we met and discussed everything together with the management team. One more important thing in pipeline is that you have to rid of micromanagement. You can rid of micromanagement if you have agreed upon the rules. Then you will not have to stick your head in every communication, every decision, every discussion, because it complicates your work. It leads to burnout, and it will not lead to anything positive. So try to not be involved in micromanagement. All of these 3 words that start with P in Ukrainian, this is my favorite rule. These are the 3 founding elements. If you memorize them, that will help you work in your team. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is better later than the same as last time. An example. Imagine you need to get from point A to point B. Imagine your speed will be 60 kilometers per hour so that you make it on time. But suddenly your car broke down. What is more efficient? Fixing your car or getting out of the car and pushing it? Of course, each of you will tell you have to fix it. Of course, we're going to come 30 minutes later, but we will still make it. But if we'll be pushing the car, most likely we're not gonna push it to the point B, and we're gonna stay somewhere in the middle of nowhere. It seems to make sense, but I'd like to tell you that in animation production, it doesn't make sense always. When we are creating complicated thing, if you have even 3 persons, at a certain point in time when something does not work, you have to stop and fix it. So if you have some conflict between people working, for example, between a director and head animator, or director of animation or art director can disagree with some other crew members, you should not ignore it and hope that it's gonna smoothen somehow. No, you have to stop, you have to fix it, and you have to keep going. Well, of course, there is a budget limitation. Of course, there is a deadline, but I really, really recommend you, based on my experience, don't do that. And I would like to tell you about one good example when we stopped at a right point in time, and afterwards I'll like to show you a quick video. When we were working on the Stolen Princess, there was one episode where Mila Princess was fighting the cakes, and there were lots of cakes in it. But due to the fact that a month before we were supposed to submit it, we realized that we need to switch to the new software that is called Katana, because working as fast as we would like to using the same software did not work. That is why in the middle of the project we decided to risk it and realized that we want to not simply create a project, we want to commit it on time, that we want to submit it on time, and it was quite a complicated decision. It took us about a month to discuss it. Should we do it this way or that way? But still, we decided to risk it and fix those things that did not work. Those of you who are working with that understand that it speeded up our work, and it allowed us to have smaller amount of professionals who are working on that, and if not for this software, would not be able to render as many cakes as we had in that episode. That is why, could you please turn on the video with the cakes so that you can see what we got? I'm gonna give you some cakes now. You missed. Now this is a war. Oh, this is the hat that makes me go invisible. This is not fun anymore. So this is quite an interesting example. I have just recalled what I wanted to show it. I didn't want to talk that much about the cupcakes. I actually was talking about a different video rather than one that I showed. If you have seen Chernomor's face, when the cake hit him, it left a mark of a certain color, the same color as the cupcake. And we had a real huge fight with director saying, nobody's gonna see what color cupcake was flying at him. There will be different colored spots, nobody's gonna realize it. However, we haven't managed to agree with him, so there was a purple cupcake and the spot was also purple, but that was not the main priority because we spent a lot of time on that. And the audience, if you ask them what color was cupcake and what color spots were, nobody really looks at that. This rule also is another cool example about the priorities, about what is important and what is not important. And for the creator, everything matters. Say we can have 200 million US dollars budget, then we can even work with cupcakes. But this is Ukrainian animation. We do not at the time have budgets like that. That is why you have to clearly set the priorities. One more thing that I'd like to talk about is the important thing number 6. That never happened, but here it comes again. This is a well-known phrase by one famous politician that I very often use in my work. Now I would like to talk about how you analyze your mistakes. Making mistakes is okay. And making mistakes for those people for whom almost every work they create is one of the first, because the stolen princess for all of us, for the producers, artists, management, it was our first feature cartoon. And it is okay to make mistakes, but it is not okay to make same mistake in the same place twice. And it is important. You cannot simply turn a blind eye to mistakes. You have to always stop and try and analyze what did that happen. And later I'm gonna talk about communication with the team. I'd like to say that the most important is not to look for the guilty one, but rather understand where is the weak spot in the system. So if there is a mistake in your project, something goes wrong, you have to breathe out, stop, try and figure out why that happened, fix it, change it, and then write it down in the rules and saying that here is one more rule which will help us avoid that mistake in the future. Let's take an example of our pipeline. When we were working with the models, how we're creating hair and clothes, how that is used for render and animation. Now at every step we have wonderful checklist, and it has been updated all the time. When we see some kind of a mistake and say, okay, we have missed this mistake, now we have go back from process number 5 to process number 1, and we are trying to check it. So in managers' work, especially when we're talking about such a complicated animation process, it is important to never say about your project that never happened, but here it comes again. If you have made a mistake, just draw conclusions and try to not repeat the same mistake. An important thing is not simply saying, I'm not going to do that ever again. You have to make some amendments in the system to not repeat your mistake. The next thing, number 7. I think I'm doing something wrong. Let me give it a try once again. Oh, here it is. Number 7. I call it Manager's Old Testament. Let's put it like that. So what would I like to talk about here? I've come across it on multiple occasions because I've been working with creative people for a long time now, and I've also met people from other teams. In my team that is not the case, but in other teams I have seen that for some reason this considered among creative people that you shouldn't train your followers, because if you're teaching somebody as an apprentice, that person can learn how to do it better than you, and then nobody will need you. I think that this is a wrong idea. First, every creative person is different, with their own skill set, their vision, their experience, and every creative person is different. Second, the more we train others, the more we share our experience, this is what I'm doing at the moment, the more professionals will surround us. And I'm a strong supporter of sharing my knowledge, and I'm never afraid of the fact that those people whom I train will become better than me. It will be great if they do become better than me, so that I can delegate a part of what I do and get to the next level myself. That's why I'm encouraging all creative people share their experience to teach others. When you're teaching somebody, at the same time you are learning something. So that if we all share our experience, train other people, if we're not afraid of competition, but rather perceive it as something that will assist us, an industry in general, to grow and get better in Ukraine, that's going to be good. And why do I call it Manager's Old Testament? This is a story about testament and about delegating. In the Old Testament, there was Moses, who was leading people through the desert for 40 years, and everybody came to him to ask him about everything in the world. There was a huge line to him because there were a million of questions that people had and only one, Moses. And a guy comes to Moses and says, listen, Moses, you're going to keep working like that, you're going to die, and all the people in the line are going to die as well. Let's do the following. I think that some of you have recognized your producers or managers. Let's do the following. Let's break this group of people in thousands, then hundreds, then tens. And there will be some people who will be managing the thousands, then hundreds of people, and tens. The ones who will be controlling tens will be saying whose chicken went to whose vegetable garden and destroyed their vegetables. The ones who will be controlling hundreds will be solving other types of issues, and the ones controlling thousands will be deciding what path we will be following going through the desert. And you, Moses, will be thinking about other things because we're going to delegate some things. Understand that this example may seem weird to someone, but this is a very simple system.
Замикаю усі питання на собі.
Well, because when you have the whole task and you have the long queue of people who are expecting for certain answers or certain decisions, this manager is totally into tactics and he doesn't have enough time to think about the priorities, about the strategy, about where to develop further and about how to create the whole team. He cannot go above all of this routine piece of work and to look further. But for you to be able to go somewhere further and to see deeper and in more global way onto the project where you are moving to, once the team is beside you, and what are those people, how can you make them work interrelate with each other and to work with each other, you need to get to know how to delegate. Everything begins with the simplest. This junior composer or the junior animator or the junior VFX artist should have an opportunity. You should trust him with something. You should help him to do that. When you trust him with him, when you give him an opportunity, the person will have responsibility for that. He will feel that he's responsible for that. When he's done this step, conducted this task, or the manager who's working with you is managing a certain separate process, then the person will become more mature because he's gaining experience. When the person is becoming more mature, he has the ownership feeling. He's treating this project, this asset, this shot, this subtitles, this concept of location or concept of the character as his own. And all of us want to work with the people who have this attitude towards our project as if it were their own. Because when you do it as if it is for yourself, you do that the best way, you invest the most soul, the most efforts, then it's working the best. So I may say that undoubtedly in this stage, sometimes you will trust the people who won't be able to use the opportunity and to get this responsibility and to become more mature and have this ownership feeling. Of course, you will make mistakes, but I do assure you, you will find around you so many talents. I'll tell you as a person who believed in, and I was believed in, and I thank you, who gave me an opportunity, and I'm telling you as a person who had to entrust to new managers who came to us. Because when we began to work on The Stolen Princess, I began to work on each of the departments, modeling, animation, then CFX, VFX, lighting, composing, post-production, and so on and so forth. And a new manager came sooner or later to this position, so it was my task to give them an opportunity and to come to the moment when they feel that ownership. I would say that our team is so friendly, we become friends, we communicate, we understand each other in the middle of the sentence because we know how to delegate and not to be afraid of a competition from our next people after us and vice versa, to make them better to achieve the next step. That's what I appeal you for. The next point I'd like to mention is the favorite word in any cinema production. I do apologize, it's a bit too much, so you cannot be more rapid than the rapid. So when we plan our project, we need to try to take into account as much as we can. So as I've already mentioned when I talked about pipeline and priorities, when I spoke that we need to understand what we're doing, there are certain points which you cannot do more rapidly than it is rapid already. If one frame is rendered for 4 hours, whatever you do with it, if now the time of rendering is 4 hours, you will not do it quickly. For instance, to make a trick and in the end you can double up your team 20% before the end of the project, it won't work as well, because the older employees will train the newcomers, so doubling up the team won't help you and it's not profitable. Each of you, in the process, in the animation you're dealing with, you need to understand what takes how much time and what you can catch up with, what you can't. When you create the compose of the shots, I do understand that this episode is not that complicated, but we don't have enough time for that. Of course, we can add several people of freelance which will help us, but there are certain shots where I understand that we could have as much freelancers as we want, but this episode is so hard, it is so complicated, and you will be amazed by it in the cinemas later. Even if 10 freelancers come, they won't do that. So 9 women won't give a birth to a baby in 1 month. So you need to understand when there are those stages when you cannot speed them up in any technical or any other way. You should take them into account and to create certain milestones where you understand that we need to spend this time and not an hour fewer. It will help you in the work. Because sometimes when the manager doesn't know certain process or doesn't understand it, can have a certain illusion that he will push a button and everything will become rapid. But it's not true. That is why you need to have a very cautious treatment and attitude to that. The next foundation or the rule is one of my favorites, is for you and for my friend, instead of you and my friend. I'd like to come back to my beginning of the speech when I said that when someone is just writing interesting books where they tell how many producers are working at each animation film. But I already said that our industry is so young, so in spite the fact that Anastasia introduced me as a linear producer, I've got lots of different positions. Post-production producer and the project manager, and doubtfully, whatever you name me, all of the managers combine lots of different functions in our industry. And very often you need to do something at the project which is totally not your direct sphere of responsibility. For instance, you personally are not responsible, but there is no one to do that around you. So if this position doesn't have a stable form when one person is working instead of 10 of them, if there are certain separate cases, I would encourage you to get to know how to do that. This is how I understand post-production now. This is how I began to understand how the orchestra records the music. I also got to know how to communicate with the managers of lots of Ukrainian celebrities, because at the Stolen Princess, at the dubbing process, we had the whole flash mob of Ukrainian celebrities. Also, I got to know how to use a very useful app, which is named Final Draft, when all of the foreign industry is using and creating scripts. So don't be afraid to do more than it's required from you, especially when you have your own vision, when you work with the people who are single-minded with you, who have the same system of values and you're aimed for the same. The only thing, it shouldn't have the systematic character, because every single person has to do his or her job. But I will be honest with you, don't be afraid to step beyond your responsibility. The more you do like that, the better you understand what is done around you, the better you are seen, the better you develop your priorities, the better your pipeline is, and so on and so forth. The better everything is working, what I was mentioning above. And one of the most important foundations to be the animation manager is not to be right. This is to find compromises of everyone with everything, and of everything with everyone. Is to find compromises between the wishes of an art director to create huge locations and the technical capabilities to render such a big amount of frames, between the wishes of the director to make each shot as Disney and those resources you are allocated, between the wishes to achieve and to jump up to certain aim and the available resources and level of qualification you are gained. This is a very harsh balance, and it's also a burden of the manager, between creativity and the budgets, between the creativity and deadlines. You don't have one or another right side. The task of the manager and the main art of his in such a complicated and most expensive genre, the genre which takes most of the time in animation, is to be the compromise master. And this is very important to remember. I already have this as a rule for a long time, and it helps me in my life, though sometimes it doesn't work for me every time. The important thing is not who's right, but what's good for the project. The important thing, when the creative person is insisting on his or her wish to have 10 helicopters in the shot, yes, he's right to make his work, his job super cool. And between the issuing of the movie tomorrow, you're also right, because you have this deadline tomorrow. This is important to work on your skill to become a compromise master. You need to love every person you're working with, to be empathetical, to listen to and to find those compromises. That is why I wish you to get the black belt on compromise masters, when you understand that you are the person who has to achieve not only to be right, but to make the best for the project. I do assure you how much tension and pressure and those deadlines and budgets won't be that important for you. You will have so many creative and talented units you're working with. So these were the main 10 foundations I wanted to mention. I do understand that during such a short period of time, I would like to explain lots of the points for you and to share lots of topics. So now I'd like to show you one more video, and I will tell you the prehistory of it. When we selected during the production of The Stolen Princess, some of the episodes were dubbed into Ukrainian to show to different distributors and so on. So during this dubbing process, we selected one of the voices of Nestor, who seemed to us to be perfect for the character. So when it was time to select a celebrity who would dub one of the main characters, we were in huge controversies with the producers. Some of the team said, no, this is not the one who would suit. This is a very talented actor, but he does not suit the role. However, it was a very important art to achieve compromise between the dubbing director, the director, and the vision of the producer. And I may say that when we found this compromise, we could attract to our team one of the best voices of this animation movie, that is Sergei Pritula, who is undoubtedly a wonderful actor, and also a very funny character who generated humor and various jokes which have become, well, you know, the joke about Odessa Road was in all of the Facebook profiles of the country. So please watch what is the result of the work when the manager could become the compromise master. Are we at Odessa Road now? So this was Nestor in the end of the day, and we thank Sergei and the whole team who did Ukrainian dubbing. We thank them so much. And now let us come to work. We are using different systems, and I'd like to emphasize that the tools and the systems are chosen individually. Every studio, every team, depending on what's the type of the animation you're dealing with or which aim you're posing for yourselves, you can even have the Google table or maybe there's some chat. But for the more complicated and long processes, you need complicated tools. So I can tell what I'm using. For instance, I adore Trello. I use it mostly for post-production tasks, because for the production tasks we are using Shotgun, but this is one of the easiest systems you could have begun to work with your team. This is a very simple, native and understandable how it works, so I do recommend you, if you never used anything like that, you try to use Trello. Further on, for instance, a nice system is, if you want to organize your own tasks, is Todoist. It's a very convenient one. You could attract other people and you can make them join. You could have tasks appointed for other people. It's also very native and understandable. So if you don't use anything, you can use this system for your own management. Then, which systems exist? Here I will tell you instantly. In Ukrainian animation, you cannot use any of the existing systems. Depending on your team, you will have to combine them. I've managed Scrum and critical path method. I will not explain to you what that is. If you want to understand what that is, you could Google it and look how it works. But I could say that in each separate case, depending on the team of the people and the aims you're imposing, you need to select one kind of a symbiosis, but undoubtedly one of the systems should be used. But this is the topic for a totally separate lecture, so I can instantly invite myself to the next linoleum, where I can tell you in lots of details about different systems, because I've worked with lots of them. I faced different production issues with cinemas and animation movies, with feature movies and with TV shows, so I have something to tell to you. The next topic I'd like to tell you about is commandos, the teamwork. The teamwork begins and ends with communications. Communications need to be so clear and precise, accessible and understandable. And again, we're coming back to the vision, to the toolkit, how we're doing that. And the most important thing is to get to know how to provide with constructive feedback. I will try to explain you in the example what constructive feedback is, which is especially in this creative sphere in the animation where each task gets lots of time, takes lots of time. If the animator animates 1 second of animation, you can imagine how he feels when in 3 weeks he is told that it's not working, you should redo anything. So the constructive feedback is so important. I will tell you a very simple example trying to explain. I heard this example at one of the lectures. I do remember that it was mentioned by the director of some school. I do remember his surname is Smirnov, but I don't remember what that school was. So what was the example? Let us imagine that you're in a huge hall, the floor of which is covered with colored tiles, and your task is achieve from one end of the hole to achieve the second end, and you will know that the green tiles will be electrifying you. Of course, you can avoid all the green tiles and you will achieve it into some predictable period of time, but you won't be electrified. But let us imagine that you are standing in the hole, but the task is the same, but you don't know which color of the tile will be so dangerous. Maybe green, maybe violet, maybe blue one. Then any person, well, let us compare that with a minefield, will choose not to do anything. Or maybe, well, the person is just stagnating or just frozen because he or she doesn't know how to make a step without feeling that electricity. So when the artist feels that he is electrified, it means the misconstructive feedback, that the feedback is done by different people, that this feedback lacks any structure, that it has too much of assessment of the work and not enough of constructive component, and so on and so forth. To have a constructive feedback, then I book 2 lectures for the next linoleum, but still you need to be a good master and to be so skillful to provide people with feedback. I may say that one of the, I would say, points when you understand that the person is frozen and doesn't know what to do, when the person, the creative personality says, you tell me what you want and I will do that. Or maybe they say, I'm so tired to move this piece of work for 1 centimeter to the left or to the right. Tell me something to do, and that means that the feedback was not constructive before this phrase. That's so important because it's one of the most important points in the creative sphere. If you get to know how to provide the proper feedback, if you get to know how to construct those links and connections, the work will become more efficient and productive. People won't be afraid to create. They won't be frozen in the same position. We are not organizing the team of certain artists, animators of CFX or VFX departments with the concept artists and art director just not to let them do anything, or for them just to look at you and to wait while you're telling what to do. Not a single director would like to work with the team which only asks, tell me what to do. So to work with the team to provide constructive feedback is so important. Several more points, I've got some time left, about communications, a very cool phrase. So the remark seemed to have no sort of meaning in it, and yet it was certainly understandable. So this is the wonderful, very approximate quote from Alice in the Wonderland, which provides what is the non-constructive feedback when the manager is just sending the task from department to a different department and just repeating the words. So this is a very important thing in the communication. When you read the feedback and did not understand anything, that means that the person for whom you send the feedback won't understand the thing as well. Of course, there are certain very specific and technical details. The manager could only listen to that and then is just interested which steps should be conducted. But for instance, I'm working with the animators, and when I can see that when I had certain feedbacks from the director or lead animator, and then I did not understand everything. Maybe I did not understand which frame, which hand or which leg should be corrected. Because we need to provide lots of feedbacks during a short period of time, I always ask again. Because just to resend the task to a different place would mean that the people over there will do something wrong and will be just afraid to ask you again, or they will try to figure it out and will pose even more questions. That is why it's so important. The deadline. What did just fly by here? This is half a year. They fly by here so often here. This is the manager who shouldn't forget about the deadline. The closer the deadline is, the more you need to understand what is taking you to achieve this deadline. You need to remember about this deadline, to remind it properly to the team, to keep everyone in the proper state, and to try to plan properly, and maybe even to have certain time, additional time for technical complications, holidays or diseases. This is our task, to plan the work properly for our people, for our teams to be in properly order. The value system. This is maybe one of the most important points while working with a team. Well, you see, every person is conducting his or her work in his or her own way. One animator does it this way, the other one in a different way. One art director poses the task in this way or differently. But what needs to unite you is your value system. What you consider to be normal and for the team is totally not and will never be. Do you have the only aim? The united aim, because there is the artist who's just interested in financial part and the other artist is interested to do something, not to become someone. They won't have common grounds because each of them will invest the totally different amount of time, inspiration and creativity into the process you are conducting, and sooner or later some of them will say this one or that one and I am a different one, and so on. The value systems is what you believe in. This is the commonality of your vision, the commonality of your methods, how you communicate with the people, how you pose the tasks, how you provide the feedback, what's more important for you, the people or the process, what's more important for you, to create a movie or to create a huge studio, what's more important for you, to do a short movie like this and to have lots of quarrels and not to see each other anymore, or maybe to have nice relationship even when you finalize the project. It's a very important point and it should coincide. Undoubtedly, I am working in the commercial animation, and I used to say, I am saying, and I will always say that we cannot ignore the business component of our work, but the business component in this genre of animation cannot be the main one. The main one should be the wish to tell the story and to create complicated projects and to make animation. We should do that with the people with whom we have the same values, who want to tell your story, not just to create the successful and commercial project. I'm happy that I'm working with such people. We are united by the value system, our similarities. I adore our team. I'm incredibly thankful for them, and I wish you had the same kind of people. Motivation. Motivation is also a topic for another lecture because it can be talked about for a very long time, but I may say that out of my experience of 5 years I've been working with enormous number of people, and I may say that I've never seen for the animation in the animation that the main motivation is finances. The motivation is always to create some cool project, to achieve some new technical level, from the technical point of view, from the point of narration. For instance, when we created The Stolen Princess, first of all, we posed an aim to create the high-quality Ukrainian full-length animation movie, which we won't be ashamed to show to our friends and relatives. And out of the feedback I saw, we coped to do that because we had a common aim. We didn't want just to do some full-length movie. We wanted to tell a story, and we wanted to make it with a high quality. And as we had one and unified value system, we wanted to achieve the same, we had this kind of motivation. Undoubtedly, in the motivation, you need to notice it could be financial, it could be the opportunities of growth, and so on and so forth. But there is one more interesting and cool example about the value system as well. Let us imagine the team which includes 10 people. 5 of them are enthusiasts. 5 of them will be so-called non-enthusiasts. The enthusiasts for a long time can work for themselves and for one non-enthusiast, and to invest as much as he can. But then the issue of allocated resources and gained feedback and a result, when you have the people who are not investing that much and you are working for you and for someone, it can bring to the burnout. And you should follow to have the most of the enthusiasts and the majority of enthusiasts in your team. Sometimes the teams consist of 50-50 enthusiasts and non-enthusiasts. So when we have one enthusiast, he is replaced, when he is leaving, he is replaced by 2 non-enthusiasts. So it's very important to follow the motivation of your team and to make it the best. I do understand that we don't have all of the opportunities and to have all the super financial investments, but the openness in front of the team, to be accessible, to listen to them, is also one of the components of motivation, which won't be a huge prize for you. Well, in fact, that's it, what I wanted to tell to you. I thank you so much for the attention. I do hope that we've got some of the questions. I will show you the list of the literature which I would advise you to read. The only thing I did not include there, any books about the emotional intellect. I think that during the following decades, the managers and the board, the bosses, will be valuable if they understand what emotional intellect is and how it should be used. So please Google that. That's it, what I wanted to share with you. I do hope that it suits you, and I can advise you to take as a slogan, try not to become someone, but to do something. And if you will try to do that, you will definitely manage to do that. So Anastasia joined me. I'm sure that she wants to ask something. Yes, sure. Thank you, Sasha, for the lecture. I've got a question. My dad always said that I will never take my friends or relatives to my job, because sooner or later it will impact. And your nice relationship, especially when you're a boss and your friend is a subordinate, sooner or later it can be impacting your relationship besides work. What's your attitude, and how could you avoid that? What can I tell about that? The studio of Film UA and Animograd gave me the gift of not only wonderful colleagues, we have become friends with lots of them, and for some we even have become godfathers and godmothers for their children. So of course it's not that easy to combine friendship and work, but it would be easier that when you go to the psychotherapists and you can speak sincerely and frankly with each other. The managers with whom I worked at the Stolen Princess used to be my friends as well, the majority of them. So this is the complicated balance which I did not cope to keep always. I could say with some of the emotions in my work, I harmed our friendship relations. But the only thing I'd like to say, it's possible to work with your friends, but since the very beginning you need to make a deal about the rules. And secondly, when there are certain issues at work, you could discuss them, you could discuss even with emotions, but in such cases you should never touch your personal traits of character and relationship, and then it will be working. At least it's working by me.
Це зараз дуже
One more question about burnout. This is a very relevant topic now, especially during coronavirus times when you're all the time stuck at home. You don't go outside, don't see people. When you're working on a project for a long time, the first stage of burnout is when you get too involved. When you're only thinking, dreaming about your project, you as a manager, can you see it when it just comes? Can you somehow impact this kind of situation? Should a manager see that and give this person time to relax, to not put even more responsibilities on them because they feel so happy, they are so inspired, but what is happening? Or do you have to also control it somehow so that a person at a certain point in time doesn't get tired because of all this delight? Yes, I can answer this question. I have even noted it down. I'm gonna say it in Russian because I cannot translate it right now. And in the end, he gets too tired to work, and he's too tense to relax. Of course, that happened with me and with people I work with. I cannot say that me or the team at the project managed to solve it 100% correct, but ideally, how would I do that? When the person is too involved in the project, you have to give them work in bits. And you have to work in the following way. Say, you have 2 months when you work a lot, and then a month when it is calmer, then 2 more months when you have to work a lot, and then again. It is not that stressful, because when you have deadlines all the time and you have to keep running every single day, of course, the person will burn out. And one more important thing is that you have to also have some free time, learn something else, and you have to give the time for a team to chat informally, including chat informally with you. When you're speaking frankly, openly, when you listen to them, when you ask them for advice, when you look for something together. I always feel when I ask people to work overtime, when I understand that I should not do that now, because in communication I can see that they are exhausted, that they are tense, that they are trying to move away from me. I can even feel that when I'm texting them in a messenger. So it depends on how long the project lasts. The manager should control that, notify everybody who needs to be notified about it, and give people vacation when they need. After one large project, you should let everybody to have at least 1 month to relax, because you cannot jump to doing another project right after you have finished the previous one. And everything needs to be structured in that way. Thank you very much for today's conversation. We're gonna wrap up. This was Sasha Lutsenko, who is the line producer of Anima Grad Studio. I hope that you will be using her pieces of advice in work with your own team. And tomorrow we start at 12 p.m. Please join us. We will be talking about creating props for animated stop motion projects. Thank you and goodbye.